In 1859, the United States and Britain came dangerously close to armed conflict over a patch of land in the Pacific Northwest. The island in question was beautiful, remote, and mostly peaceful. The reason for the crisis was not gold, not a major army invasion, and not some grand act of sabotage. It was a pig. One hungry pig wandered into the wrong garden, got itself shot, and somehow helped trigger an international military standoff. This strange little conflict became known as the Pig War, and even though it sounds like a joke, it was a very real dispute that nearly pushed two major powers into battle. To understand how a pig got caught in the middle of world politics, we have to go back to 1846. That was the year Britain and the United States signed the Oregon Treaty. The treaty was supposed to settle the border west of the Rocky Mountains. It said the border would run along the 49th parallel and then continue through the middle of the channel that separated Vancouver Island from the mainland. The problem was simple. There was more than one channel. One side believed the border should go through Harrow Strait. The other believed it should go through Rosario Strait. And sitting awkwardly between those waterways were the San Juan Islands. Because of that unclear treaty wording, both Britain and the United States believed they had a rightful claim to the islands. British interests were represented mainly through the Hudson's Bay Company, which had established a large sheep farm there. American settlers also began arriving, clearing land, building homes, and planting crops. So now you had one island, two governments, and a border problem just waiting to become annoying. For a while, it stayed mostly tense, but manageable. People lived side by side, although everyone knew the ownership question had not truly been settled. The island looked peaceful, but the politics underneath were quietly simmering. One of the American settlers on San Juan Island was a man named Lyman Cutler. Like many settlers, he depended on his small farm and garden to survive. Growing food out there was not just a hobby, it mattered. So when a pig kept wandering into his garden and digging up his potatoes, Cutler was not amused. This was not some one-time nibble and stroll-away situation. The pig had apparently made a habit of treating his patch like an all-you-can-eat buffet. And, if there is one thing history has shown us, it is that people can tolerate many things, but repeated damage to their food supply can turn irritation into outrage very quickly. On June 15th, 1859, the pig wandered into Cutler's garden yet again. This time, Cutler had had enough. He raised his rifle and shot it. That single gunshot became the turning point. The pig belonged to Charles Griffin, a British subject connected to the Hudson's Bay Company. Griffin was furious. Cutler did not deny shooting the pig, but he believed he had every right to defend his crops. He reportedly offered compensation, but not much. Griffin thought the payment was insulting. Suddenly, a local argument between neighbours was no longer just about a pig. It became a symbol of the larger question. Who actually had the authority on San Juan Island? Instead of cooling down, the dispute escalated. British authorities threatened to arrest Cutler. American settlers were outraged. They did not want one of their own hauled off under British law on land they believed belonged to the United States. That fear turned the whole island situation from a farming quarrel into a political flashpoint. The pig had become a mascot for a much larger issue. Was San Juan Island American territory or British territory? Depending on your answer, the shooting of the pig was either a local nuisance or a serious crime. And once governments begin arguing over which laws count, things can get serious very fast. The American settlers decided they needed military protection. They feared the British might remove them from the island by force, or at least begin treating them as trespassers on British soil. So, word was sent to American military leaders. Soon, the United States responded by sending soldiers to San Juan Island. This was the moment the entire situation crossed from absurd to dangerous. Until then, the argument had still been mostly civilian. But when armed troops begin arriving over a border claim that has never been properly settled, even the silliest origin story can become a real international crisis. The American detachment was led by Captain George Pickett, who would later become famous during the American Civil War. Pickett and his men landed on the island and established a military presence. Their message was clear. The United States intended to defend its claim. You can imagine how this looked from the British side. What had started with one dead pig had now turned into armed occupation. The Americans were not invading some distant empire, but they were placing troops on disputed land in direct opposition to British interests. And Britain, being Britain, had ships, officers, and strong opinions of its own. Britain answered by sending warships into the area. Before long, powerful Royal Navy vessels were positioned near the island. Onshore, American troops dug in. Offshore, British naval power loomed in full view. The situation looked exactly like the sort of thing that could go very wrong. One bad order, one nervous soldier, one accidental shot, and a full conflict might have erupted. But this is where the pig war becomes even stranger. Despite the tension, cooler heads began to assert themselves. Some commanders recognized how ridiculous it would be to start a major war over a pig and a muddy patch of vegetables. For a while, the pig war became a bizarre military standoff. Both sides had armed men. Both sides believed they were in the right. Both sides wanted to show strength. And yet, neither side truly wanted to be remembered as the government that launched a blood-soaked international conflict because a pig got into someone's potatoes. British Rear Admiral Robert Baines reportedly refused to escalate the matter, supposedly saying he would not involve two great nations in a war over a squabble about a pig. That restraint mattered. It did not solve the dispute immediately, but it prevented the entire thing from becoming a tragic and embarrassing disaster. Instead of fighting, the island settled into an uneasy coexistence. American soldiers occupied one part of San Juan Island, while British forces occupied another. The two camps remained there for years. This was not a quick misunderstanding solved in an afternoon. It became a prolonged, shared occupation, with both sides carefully maintaining their claim while avoiding open conflict. There were rules, routines, and tense diplomacy. The island had become one of the strangest military standoffs in history. Imagine waking up every day on a quiet, scenic island where two empires are both politely not going to war in your backyard, because everyone agrees the entire reason is too ridiculous. Eventually, both governments realized the dispute needed a proper diplomatic solution. Neither side wanted the issue festering forever, and both had bigger problems to think about than one awkwardly placed island. So the argument moved away from the soldiers and back toward negotiators. That shift was important. It meant the crisis would be handled through diplomacy rather than force. In a way, the pig war became a small but meaningful example of restraint. It showed that even in an age when nations often used military power very freely, leaders could still step back, breathe, and decide that maybe, just maybe, this particular matter did not need cannons. The final settlement did not come immediately. Years later, the dispute was submitted to arbitration. The decision was made by Kaiser Wilhelm I of Germany, who was asked to help determine which boundary interpretation should stand. In 1872, the ruling came down in favor of the United States. The border would follow Harrow Strait, which meant the San Juan Islands became American territory. And just like that, one of the oddest international disputes in history officially ended. Not with a dramatic charge, not with a battlefield victory, but with maps, legal arguments, and a foreign monarch deciding which line made the most sense. In the end, the only true casualty of the pig war was the pig itself. No major battle took place. No armies clashed in bloody combat. No dramatic last stand unfolded on the island. What nearly became a war between Britain and the United States ended as a story historians now tell with a mixture of amusement and disbelief. But that does not mean it was meaningless. The stakes were real. Military forces were deployed. Warships were present. People genuinely feared escalation. The fact that it ended peacefully is what makes it remarkable. History is full of foolish beginnings that lead to terrible endings. This one, thankfully, did not. The Pig War reminds us that history is not always shaped by giant speeches and grand heroic moments. Sometimes it is shaped by confusion, pride, awkward boundaries, and one extremely unfortunate animal with terrible garden manners. A single pig exposed a flaw in an international treaty, triggered military mobilization, and forced two nations to confront whether they would let pride push them into something absurd. Thankfully, they chose patience instead. And that is why this remains one of the strangest and most memorable border disputes ever recorded. A near war, a peaceful ending, and a pig that accidentally walked straight into the history books.